Princess Valara Thax had never known fear in her entire life. She was born on Korath Prime, a planet that the Galactic Council had classified as a Category 7 Deathworld. Her world was covered in acid storms that could melt starship metal in minutes. The plants on her planet were not peaceful things that swayed in the wind. They were hunters. They had teeth and claws, and they ate anything that came too close. The animals were worse. Massive beasts with armor-plated skin roamed the forests, and flying predators with wingspans larger than shuttlecraft ruled the skies. Her people, the Karithi, had evolved to survive all of this. Valara stood nearly 8 feet tall. Her skin was covered in thick green scales that could stop a blade. Her eyes could see perfectly in complete darkness. Her claws carried venom that could kill most species in seconds. She was a warrior, a hunter, and the daughter of the High King himself, so when the Galactic Council asked her to serve as an ambassador to a newly discovered species called humans, she accepted without concern. She had read the basic reports. Humans came from a planet called Earth. They were small, soft-skinned creatures with no natural weapons. They had no claws, no venom, no armor. They could not see in the dark. They could not run particularly fast. They were, by all measures, one of the most physically unimpressive species ever discovered. Valara expected this mission to be boring. She expected to spend a few months teaching these fragile creatures about galactic politics, then return home to more interesting duties. She was very, very wrong. The human colony ship was called the Wanderer. It was a large vessel, though not as large as Karithi warships. Valara had to duck her head to pass through most doorways, and the corridors felt cramped around her massive frame. The humans she passed stared at her with wide eyes, but none of them ran away screaming. This surprised her. Most species fled when they first saw a Karithi. She found her way to the engineering section, where she had been told she could find her assigned human liaison. The doors slid open, and she stepped into a room filled with machines and cables and the sharp smell of burning metal. A young human male was crouched beside an open panel, his hands deep inside a mess of wires and circuits. Sparks flew from whatever he was working on, landing on his bare arms. He did not flinch. He did not pull away. He simply kept working, humming a strange tune under his breath. Valara watched him for a long moment. The sparks were leaving small red marks on his skin. She could see them clearly. Burns. The human was burning himself, and he did not seem to care. "That causes you pain," she said finally. The human looked up. He had brown hair that stuck up in messy directions and eyes the color of Earth's sky, according to the pictures she had seen. His face was covered in a thin layer of sweat and grime. He smiled at her, showing flat white teeth that were clearly not designed for killing. "Oh, hey, you must be the Karithi ambassador." He wiped his hand on his pants and extended it toward her. "I'm Danny Cole. Nice to meet you." Valara looked at his hand. She had read about this human custom. She reached out and wrapped her massive clawed hand around his, being very careful not to cut his soft skin. His grip was surprisingly firm. "The sparks," she said again. "They burn you." Danny glanced at his arms, where small red welts were already forming. He shrugged. "Yeah, a little. You get used to it. Hazard of the job, you know?" Valara did not know. On Korath Prime, pain was something to be avoided. Her people healed quickly from most injuries, but they still did not seek out suffering. These humans seemed different. Over the next several days, Valara observed the humans carefully. She watched them eat their meals, strange combinations of dead plants and animals that they called things like sandwiches and pizza and stir-fry. She watched them exercise in their gymnasium, lifting heavy weights and running on machines that went nowhere. She watched them play games that involved throwing bowls at each other with alarming force. but it was the small things that bothered her most. She watched a human woman drink a beverage so hot that steam rose from the cup. The woman burned her tongue and laughed about it, then kept drinking. She watched a human man eat something called a pepper that made his face turn red and caused tears to stream from his eyes. He gasped for air and asked for another one. She watched two humans engage in something called boxing, which involved hitting each other in the face repeatedly until one of them could no longer stand. None of this made sense to her. One evening, Danny invited her to watch something called a documentary about Earth. She accepted, curious to learn more about this strange species and their homeworld. They sat together in a small viewing room, and Danny activated the screen. Images began to play. Beautiful images at first. Blue oceans and green forests and mountains capped with white snow. Then the narrator began to speak. Valara watched footage of something called a hippopotamus, a massive creature that looked slow and peaceful. It crushed a smaller animal in its jaws with casual violence. She watched something called a crocodile ambush a drinking animal and drag it underwater to drown. She watched schools of fish with razor teeth strip the flesh from a carcass in seconds. "Your oceans," she said slowly. "They are filled with predators." "Oh yeah," Danny said cheerfully. "Sharks, orcas, box jellyfish, blue-ringed octopuses, stonefish, sea snakes. Lots of stuff that can kill you." The documentary continued. It showed massive storms that flattened cities, earthquakes that split the ground open, volcanoes that buried entire regions in ash and fire, waves taller than buildings that swept across coastlines. "Your planet tries to kill you," Valara said. "Pretty much constantly," Danny agreed. She watched footage of tiny insects called mosquitoes. The narrator explained that these creatures killed nearly 1 million humans every year through disease transmission alone. 1 million, Valara repeated. "Every year. From insects. Yeah, they're pretty nasty. We've got ticks too. And fleas. And these things called botflies that lay eggs under your skin." Valara felt her scales ripple with discomfort. She was a warrior princess from a Deathworld. She had killed creatures that could swallow shuttlecraft whole. But the casual way Danny described these horrors unsettled her deeply. "Danny," she said carefully, "what is Earth's classification on the Galactic Council's danger scale?" He scratched the back of his neck, looking slightly embarrassed. "Category 12, I think. The council surveyors seemed pretty freaked out when they visited. One of them got stung by a bee and had some kind of allergic reaction. Another one got food poisoning from a street vendor. They left pretty quickly after that." Category 12. Valara felt the world shift around her. The Galactic Council's danger scale only went up to 12. It was the maximum possible rating, reserved for planets so hostile that no rational species should ever have evolved there at all. Korath Prime, her homeworld, the planet that had produced the most feared warriors in the galaxy, was a Category 7. Earth was nearly twice as dangerous. She looked at Danny Cole, this small, soft, fragile creature with his easy smile and his burned arms and his complete lack of natural weapons. He had evolved on a world that made Korath Prime look like a vacation resort. His ancestors had survived storms and predators and diseases and disasters that would have wiped out most species entirely, and he had not even thought to mention it. "Danny," Valara said slowly, "I think I may have underestimated your species." He grinned at her. "Most people do. Want some popcorn? It's a little burnt, but that's how I like it." She accepted the small bowl of charred grain and said nothing. She had a great deal of thinking to do. News traveled fast on the diplomatic vessel. Within days, every species aboard knew that the fearsome Karithi princess had taken a personal interest in the human delegation. This drew attention from many quarters, but none more dangerous than the Varax Empire. The Varax were an ancient species, older than the Karithi by thousands of years. They had evolved on a heavy gravity world of constant volcanic activity and toxic atmosphere. Their bodies were covered in black chitin, a natural armor harder than most metals. They stood on 4 legs and had 2 additional limbs that served as arms, each ending in pincers strong enough to crush stone. Their heads were dominated by massive mandibles and clusters of compound eyes that saw in every direction at once. For centuries, the Virax and the Karithi had been rivals. They competed for the same resources, the same territories, the same position as the galaxy's dominant warrior race. The rivalry was not always violent, but it was always present. Ambassador Drax of the Virax was particularly interested in learning why the Karithi princess was spending so much time with the humans. He considered the soft little creatures beneath his notice, but anything that interested his enemy interested him as well. He found Danny Cole alone in the mess hall during the night cycle, eating something called a cheeseburger. The human looked up as Drax approached, all 4 tons of him clicking and scraping across the metal floor. "Hey there," Danny said pleasantly. "You're one of the Virax, right? Want to sit down?" Drax loomed over the human, his mandibles clicking with obvious threat. "You are the creature that has captured the attention of Princess Valara." "I guess so. We've been hanging out a lot lately. I find this curious. You are small, weak. Your skin is soft enough that I could tear it with minimal effort. You have no natural defenses, no armor, no weapons built into your body." Drax leaned closer, his compound eyes reflecting Danny's face dozens of times. "What could you possibly offer that would interest a Karithi warrior?" Danny took another bite of his cheeseburger and chewed thoughtfully. "Good conversation, mostly. She seems pretty interested in Earth. Hey, do your people eat? I could grab you something from the kitchen." The casual response confused Drax. He had expected fear. He had expected the human to tremble and stammer, and perhaps beg for mercy. This calm friendliness was not in any of his threat response calculations. "You do not fear me," Drax observed. "Should I? I could kill you with 1 strike of my pincer. I could crush your skull like an egg." "Probably," Danny agreed. "But you won't. We're on a diplomatic vessel. Killing me would cause an incident. The Karithi princess seems to like me, so that would make things awkward for you. And honestly, I don't think you came here to kill me. I think you came here because you're curious." Drax's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "You are perceptive for such a fragile creature." "We have to be. On Earth, everything is trying to kill us. You learn to read situations pretty fast." This statement caught Drax's attention. He had heard rumors about Earth's classification, but he had assumed they were exaggerated. Category 12 seemed impossible for a species so physically unimpressive. "Tell me about your world," Drax demanded. Danny shrugged. "What do you want to know? How did your species survive? You have no armor, no weapons, no natural advantages that I can see. We've got a few tricks." Danny set down his food and leaned back in his chair. "You know what persistence hunting is?" Drax did not. "So on Earth, there are these animals that run really fast. Way faster than humans. Deer, antelope, that kind of thing. In a sprint, they'd beat us every time. We'd never catch them in a straight chase." "Then how did you hunt them?" "We didn't chase them in a sprint. We chased them for hours. Days sometimes." Danny smiled at the memory of stories his grandfather had told him. "See, those animals run fast, but they overheat. They have to stop and rest. But humans, we sweat. We can regulate our body temperature while we run. So we just keep following them, walking, jogging, never stopping, never giving up. Eventually, the animal would collapse from exhaustion, and we'd walk right up to it and kill it." Drax was silent for a long moment. His species hunted through ambush and overwhelming force. The idea of simply following prey until it died from exhaustion was alien to him. "Your species hunted by refusing to stop," he said slowly. "Pretty much. We're stubborn like that. This seems inefficient. Maybe, but it worked. For 100,000 years, it worked. We're still here, right?" Drax considered this. He thought about all the species he knew, all the different hunting strategies they employed. None of them involved simply continuing until the prey gave up. "I have heard other stories about humans," Drax said. "Stories that seem impossible." "Like what?" "I heard that your kind can survive the loss of limbs, that you can have them removed and continue living." "Oh yeah, we've got prosthetics now. Fake legs and arms that work almost as well as the real thing. Some of them are actually better. I heard that you poison your cells for pleasure, that you consume substances that damage your internal organs and impair your judgment. Alcohol? Yeah, we do that. Caffeine too. And capsaicin, the stuff that makes peppers spicy. It causes pain, but we like it anyway." Drax's mandibles clicked rapidly. Why would any species deliberately cause itself harm? Danny thought about this for a moment. "I guess because we're not afraid of pain. Pain is just information. It tells you something is wrong, but it doesn't have to stop you. I knew a guy back home who got hit by a car. Both his legs were shattered. Multiple fractures. The bones were sticking out through his skin. He died," Drax said. This was not a question. No. He asked if the driver was okay. Then he tried to stand up. We had to hold him down until help arrived. He survived. Had surgery. Learned to walk again. Died 2 years later, peacefully, in his sleep. That is not possible. It's not common, Danny admitted. But it's not impossible. Humans can take a lot of damage and keep going. We're hard to kill. Drax stared at the human for a long time. He thought about everything he had learned. A species that hunted through sheer persistence. A species that poisoned itself for fun. A species that could lose limbs and continue fighting. "Your world," Drax said finally. "It truly is Category 12? That's what the Council says. The scale only goes to 12. I know. You evolved on the most dangerous type of planet possible, and you have no natural weapons or defenses." Danny grinned. "We've got one defense. We just don't quit. Ever. No matter what happens, we keep going. We keep fighting. We keep surviving. It's kind of our thing." Princess Valara had been watching from the doorway. She stepped into the room now, her massive form drawing the attention of both males. "Ambassador Drax," she said coolly. "I see you have met my human liaison." Drax looked at her, then at Danny, then back at her. Something had changed in his compound eyes. Something that might have been respect. Or fear. Or both. "I have," he said. "I begin to understand your interest, Princess. These creatures are not what they appear to be." "No," Valara agreed. "They are not." Drax turned and left without another word. His footsteps seemed faster than before, his posture less confident. Valara sat down across from Danny. "You handled that well." "Thanks." He seemed curious more than threatening. Danny picked up his cheeseburger again. "You know, most species run away when they find out about Earth." He actually seemed interested. "The Varax respect strength." You showed him a kind of strength he had never considered before. "The whole persistence thing?" "Yes, and more than that." Valara leaned forward, her golden eyes studying him carefully. "You were not afraid of him. You knew he could kill you, and you simply did not care." Danny shrugged. "But being afraid of dying doesn't stop you from dying. Might as well stay calm and see what happens." Valara shook her head slowly. "Your species is terrifying, Danny Cole. We prefer the term determined. She laughed at that, a deep rumbling sound that made the table vibrate. It was the first time Danny had ever heard a Carithi laugh, and he found himself smiling in response. Determined, she repeated, "Yes, I suppose that is accurate." She reached across the table and took one of the fried potato strips from his tray. She had been observing human eating habits for weeks and had developed a taste for what they called French fries. "Tell me more about Earth," she said. "I want to understand." Danny smiled and began to talk. He told her about hurricanes and tornadoes, about sharks and crocodiles, about wars and plagues and extinctions. He told her about how humans had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times and somehow survived every disaster. And Valara listened, her respect for this strange species growing with every word. The diplomatic vessel was 3 weeks into its journey to the Galactic Council headquarters when disaster struck. They were passing through the Charon Nebula, a region of space known for its beautiful colors and generally calm conditions. The ship's captain had chosen this route specifically because it was considered safe. The universe, it seemed, had other plans. The radiation storm appeared without warning. One moment the sensors showed nothing unusual. The next moment, a wall of deadly energy was sweeping toward them faster than the ship could move. The captain barely had time to raise shields before the storm hit. The ship shook violently. Lights flickered. Alarms began screaming throughout every corridor. Valara grabbed the nearest wall to steady herself as the floor tilted beneath her feet. "All hands, this is the captain," a voice announced over the speakers. "We have encountered a rare radiation event. Shields are holding, but several sections have lost power. Repair teams are responding. All non-essential personnel should remain in their quarters." Valara was on the bridge, helping coordinate the response. She watched the damage reports scroll across the screens with growing concern. Multiple sections were affected. The repair teams were stretched thin, running from crisis to crisis. Then she saw the report that made her blood run cold. The human quarters had lost power. Their section was exposed to radiation levels that would become lethal within 20 minutes. The closest repair team was dealing with a fire in the engine room. They could not reach the humans in time. Valara did not hesitate. She ran. The corridors were chaos. Emergency lights bathed everything in red. Smoke drifted from damaged panels. Crew members of various species rushed past her, each dealing with their own emergencies. Valara pushed through them all, her massive frame smashing through obstacles that smaller beings had to go around. She reached the human quarters in 4 minutes. The doors were sealed, locked down by emergency protocols. She could see through the small window that the lights inside were flickering. The radiation warning signs above the door glowed an angry red. She punched the emergency override, and the doors slid open. What she saw inside surprised her. She had expected panic. She had expected screaming and crying, and humans huddled in corners, waiting to die. That was what most species did when facing certain death. They fell apart. They gave up. The humans were not giving up. A woman named Lisa Park had torn open a wall panel and was rewiring the circuits inside. Her hands moved with calm precision despite the danger. An older man named George Miller was shouting orders, directing people to seal off the most damaged sections using emergency foam and furniture. A young woman was tearing sheets into strips and handing them out, to be used as makeshift radiation shielding. And Danny Cole was climbing into a maintenance shaft that glowed with visible radiation. Valara grabbed his arm. "What are you doing?" Danny looked at her, and she saw no fear in his eyes. Only determination. "Main power junction is fried. I can reroute through the backup system, but someone has to hold the connection manually while Lisa gets the secondary online. That shaft is flooded with radiation. You will be exposed. I know. You could die." Danny smiled at her. It was a strange smile, sad and brave at the same time. If I don't try, everyone dies. 17 people in this section. Friends, colleagues, people I've known for years. He shrugged. Math seems pretty simple to me. There must be another way. There isn't. I've checked. He pulled his arm free from her grip, gently but firmly. 5 minutes. That's all we need. Lisa is fast. I just have to hold the connection for 5 minutes. The radiation will damage your cells. Your body will suffer permanent harm. Probably. But I'll heal. Humans are tough like that. He pulled a thermal blanket around his shoulders and wrapped his hands in strips of torn fabric. It was pathetic protection against the radiation he was about to face, but it was something. Look, I don't have time to argue. Either help us or get out of the way. Valara wanted to stop him. She wanted to grab him and drag him away from the shaft and lock him somewhere safe. But she could see the other humans watching them. She could see the trust in their eyes. They trusted Danny to save them. They trusted that he would do whatever was necessary. And she understood that this was how humans had survived their Deathworld. Not through strength or speed or natural weapons. Through sacrifice. Through the willingness to risk everything for each other. What can I do? She asked. Danny grinned at her. Help George move those storage containers. We need to build a barrier around the most exposed areas. He disappeared into the maintenance shaft before she could respond. Valara worked. She lifted containers that would have required 3 humans to move. She held barriers in place while others secured them. She followed George's directions, this small old human who commanded a room, full of panicking people with the calm authority of a general on a battlefield. She watched Lisa work on the power systems, her fingers dancing across circuits and wires with incredible speed. She watched the other humans help each other, sharing what little protection they had, checking on each other constantly. She watched the clock. On the wall, count down the minutes until the radiation would become fatal. 4 minutes passed. Lisa shouted something technical that Valara did not understand. The lights flickered once, twice, and then came on fully. The ventilation systems hummed back to life. The radiation warning lights above the door changed from red to yellow to green. Power was restored. Danny emerged from the maintenance shaft looking terrible. His face was red and blistered on one side. His arms were covered in burns. His hand shook as he pulled himself free from the opening. But he was smiling. Told you, he said. 5 minutes. The other humans surrounded him immediately. Lisa pulled out a medical kit and began treating his burns. George clapped him on the shoulder and said something about buying him drinks when they reached the station. The young woman who had been making bandages started to cry with relief. Valara stood back and watched. She had seen warriors on Karth Prime do brave things. She had seen soldiers charge into battle against impossible odds. But she had never seen anything quite like this. Danny had not fought an enemy. He had not won glory in combat. He had simply climbed into a hole filled with poison and held 2 wires together until his people were safe. And now his friends were treating him like he had won a great victory. Because to them, he had. You should be dead, Valara said quietly. Danny looked up at her, his face half covered in healing cream. Probably. But I'm not. That's kind of the human way. We're supposed to die, and then we don't. Your wounds are severe. I'll heal. Might have some scars. Might lose some hair. He shrugged, then winced because the movement hurt his burned shoulders. Worth it. George Miller approached Valara. He was a small man with gray hair and wrinkled skin, but his eyes were sharp and bright. Thank you for helping us, he said. We couldn't have moved those containers without you. I did very little. You stayed. You helped. A lot of species would have run away and left us to die. He smiled at her. Danny was right about you. He said you were different from what we expected." Valara looked at Danny, who was pretending not to hear the conversation, while Lisa wrapped bandages around his arms. "He spoke about me?" "All the time. He thinks you're going to change things for humanity. Help us fit into the galaxy better than we would on our own." Valara thought about this. She thought about everything she had seen since boarding this ship. The humans who ate fire for pleasure. The humans who hunted through sheer persistence. The humans who poisoned themselves for fun. The humans who climbed into radiation-filled shafts to save their friends. "I am beginning to think," she said slowly, "that humanity does not need my help to fit into the galaxy. I think the galaxy needs to change to fit humanity." George laughed. "That's probably more accurate. We're not very good at adapting to other people's rules." The ship lurched slightly as it cleared the radiation storm. The emergency alarms fell silent. Normal lighting returned throughout the vessel. The crisis was over, but Valara knew that something fundamental had changed. She had seen humans in action. She had seen what they were capable of when their backs were against the wall. And she knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy had no idea what it was dealing with, but Valara was starting to understand. And she found, somewhat to her surprise, that she was looking forward to watching what happened next. Nexus Station was the largest artificial structure in the known galaxy. It hung in space like a small moon, covered in lights and docking ports and antenna arrays that stretched for miles in every direction. Ships from 1,000 different species came and went constantly, carrying diplomats and merchants and travelers of every kind. The Galactic Council met here, in a vast chamber at the heart of the station. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to discuss laws and treaties and the fate of entire civilizations. It was here that humanity would be judged. It was here that Valara would present her assessment of whether the newcomers from Earth deserved a place in galactic society. She had spent the last 2 days of the journey preparing her report. She had written draft after draft, trying to find the right words to describe what she had learned about humanity. None of them felt adequate. How could she explain that the softest, most fragile-looking species she had ever met was also the most terrifying? The council chamber was vast. Thousands of seats rose in tiers around a central platform where speakers addressed the assembly. Valara stood on that platform now, looking up at the gathered representatives. She saw Varax and Karithi, her own people, watching her with curious eyes. She saw the insectoid hive mind delegates and the aquatic swimmers in their water-filled ponds. She saw species she did not recognize, beings of every shape and size and form. And in the upper gallery, she saw the human delegation. Danny was there, his face still showing faint scars from the radiation burns. He smiled at her and gave a small wave. She took a deep breath and began. "Honored representatives of the Galactic Council, I stand before you today to present my assessment of the species known as humanity, natives of the planet Earth." Her voice carried clearly through the chamber, amplified by the translation systems that allowed every species to understand her words. "I was chosen for this assignment because of my background. My homeworld, Korath Prime, is classified as a Category 7 Deathworld. My people are considered among the most dangerous in the galaxy. The Council believed this experience would give me unique insight into species that evolve under extreme conditions." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the assembly. "I must tell you that I was wrong. The Council was wrong. We all underestimated what humanity truly is." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several representatives leaned forward in their seats. "I expected to find fragile creatures who needed protection. I expected to teach them about the dangers of the galaxy and guide them through their first steps into interstellar society. Instead, I found something that changed my understanding of what strength truly means." She activated the holographic display behind her. Images of Earth appeared, beautiful and deadly, oceans and forests and mountains, storms and earthquakes and volcanoes. This is Earth, humanity's homeworld. The Galactic Council has classified it as Category 12 on the danger scale. For those unfamiliar with the scale, Category 12 is the maximum possible rating. It represents a world so hostile that no rational analysis would predict the evolution of intelligent life. She let that sink in for a moment. Korath Prime, the world that produced the feared Korethi warriors, is Category 7. Earth is nearly twice as dangerous. The murmurs grew louder. Several representatives were consulting with their aides, clearly surprised by this information. Let me describe Earth for you, Valara continued. It is a world where the weather itself can kill. Massive storms called hurricanes and typhoons tear across the surface, generating winds strong enough to destroy cities. Columns of spinning air called tornadoes touch down without warning and obliterate everything in their path. The planet's temperature varies wildly, from frozen wastelands where exposed skin dies within minutes to deserts so hot that the ground itself can cause burns. The image is shifted, showing the devastation of natural disasters. The planet's crust is unstable. The ground shakes and splits open in events called earthquakes. Mountains explode in volcanic eruptions that can block out the sun for years. Massive waves called tsunamis sweep across coastlines, drowning millions. More images, more destruction. And then there is the life that evolved on this world. Earth is filled with predators. Sharks that can smell blood from miles away. Crocodiles that have remained unchanged for millions of years because they are already perfect killing machines. Snakes whose venom can kill within minutes. Spiders whose bite causes flesh to rot. Jellyfish whose touch brings agony and death. She showed footage of these creatures, watching as several representatives recoiled at the images. But the most dangerous creatures on Earth are not the large predators. They are the small ones. Insects called mosquitoes kill nearly 1 million humans every year by spreading disease. Bacteria and viruses wage constant war against human bodies. The very air humans breathe can carry death in forms too small to see. She paused, letting the horror of this sink in. And yet humanity survived. They did not merely survive. They conquered. They became the dominant species on a world that seemed designed to murder them. She turned to face the assembly directly. How did they do this? They had no armor, no claws, no venom, no natural weapons of any kind. They are small and slow and soft. By every measure, they should have been extinct millions of years ago. The chamber was silent now. Every eye was fixed on her. They survived through two things. First, their minds. Humans are intelligent, yes, but more than that, they are adaptable. They can learn. They can invent. They can solve problems that should be impossible. They built tools when they had no claws. They built shelter when they had no armor. They built weapons when they had no natural defenses. She thought about Danny, rewiring circuits in a radiation-filled shaft. Lisa Park, calmly solving technical problems while death counted down around her. Second, they survived through each other. Humans are pack animals. They form bonds with each other that they will die to protect. I have seen this myself. I watched a human walk into certain death to save 17 of his companions. He did not hesitate. He did not calculate his odds of survival. He simply went because that was what his people needed him to do. She found Danny's eyes in the gallery. He looked embarrassed by the attention, but also proud. This willingness to sacrifice is not rare among humans. It is common. It is expected. Their entire history is filled with stories of individuals who gave everything, including their lives, to protect others. They consider this normal. They consider this what it means to be human. She stepped forward, her voice rising. Do not mistake their soft bodies for weakness. Do not mistake their friendly nature for submission. Humanity has faced extinction more times than most species have faced serious challenges. They have survived ice ages and plagues and famines and wars. They have nearly destroyed themselves with weapons they invented and somehow pulled back from the edge. They have made mistakes that would have ended other species and learned from everyone. She thought about everything Danny had told her. About the world wars and the nuclear standoffs. About the diseases that killed millions and the medical advances that followed. About the endless cycle of destruction and renewal that defined human history. What makes humanity dangerous is not what they can do to others. It is what they are willing to do to themselves. They will break their own bones to save a friend. They will walk into fire for a stranger. They will keep fighting long after any sane species would surrender, not because they believe they will win, but because giving up is simply not in their nature. She lowered her voice, making the chamber lean in to hear her. My recommendation to this council is simple. Accept humanity as full members of the galactic community. Give them the respect they have earned through millions of years of refusing to die. Work with them. Learn from them. Ally with them. She paused one final time. And whatever you do, do not give them a reason to consider you an enemy. Because humans do not know how to quit. And given enough time, that makes them unbeatable. She stepped back from the podium. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, applause began. It started in the human gallery and spread. Soon, representatives from dozens of species were joining in, acknowledging the power of her words. Valara looked up at Danny. He was clapping with the others, a huge smile on his scarred face. She had done what she came to do. She had told the galaxy the truth about humanity. Now it was up to the galaxy to decide what to do with that truth. The council vote took 3 days. 3 days of debates and arguments and negotiations. 3 days of species weighing the risks and rewards of accepting humanity into their ranks. 3 days of uncertainty for the human delegation, who waited in their quarters and tried to pretend they were not worried. Valara spent those 3 days answering questions. Representatives from dozens of species sought her out, wanting to know more about the humans she had traveled with. They asked about Earth, about human history, about the radiation storm, and how the humans had responded. She answered every question as honestly as she could. Ambassador Drax of the Varax was among those who sought her counsel. He found her in a quiet garden on the station, a space filled with plants from hundreds of worlds. She was sitting on a bench, watching the artificial sunlight filter through leaves of every color. Princess Valara, he said, settling his massive form beside her. I have been thinking about what you said in the council chamber. And what have you concluded? Drax's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. I have concluded that my species has been fools. We have spent centuries competing with the Karithi for the title of the galaxy's greatest warriors. We have measured strength in armor thickness and claw sharpness and venom potency. We never considered that true strength might look different. Different how? The human, Danny Cole. He walked into radiation that should have killed him to save his companions. He did not do this because he thought he would survive. He did it knowing he might die. Drax shook his head, a gesture he had learned from watching humans. No Varax would do this. We calculate risks. We preserve ourselves. A Varax would sacrifice others to survive. We would not sacrifice ourselves for others. That is the difference, Valara agreed. Humans do not think of themselves as individuals first. They think of themselves as parts of groups. Families, friends, communities. They will die for these groups without hesitation. It is terrifying, Drax said, and admirable. I find myself respecting these creatures, Princess. I did not expect to. Neither did I. They sat in silence for a moment, two warriors from Deathworlds contemplating a species that had evolved on something even worse. How will you vote? Valara asked. In favor. Humanity should join the galaxy. They will make valuable allies. Drax paused. And terrible enemies, should anyone be foolish enough to provoke them. I agree. On the third day, the vote was held. Valara watched from the gallery as representative after representative cast their decision. The count was not even close. By a margin of 3-1, the Galactic Council voted to accept humanity as full members of interstellar civilization. The human delegation erupted in celebration. They hugged each other and laughed, and some of them cried. Danny was in the middle of it, being slapped on the back by colleagues and lifted off his feet by the larger members of the group. Valara watched them with something that felt almost like fondness. Later that evening, she found Danny on an observation deck. It was a small space, quiet and private, with a massive window that looked out on the stars. He was alone, leaning against the glass, staring at the infinite darkness beyond. May I join you? She asked, of course. He moved aside to make room for her, though her massive form took up most of the available space. Some view, huh? It is beautiful. She looked at the stars, then at him. You seem thoughtful for someone who just achieved a great victory. Danny smiled, but it was a complicated smile. I'm happy. Really, I am. This is what we came here for. Humanity is part of the galaxy now. We'll have allies, trading partners, access to technology we never dreamed of. He paused. But it also means things will never be the same. Change is not always bad. No, but it's scary. We've spent our whole history alone. Just us against Earth, against each other, against everything. Now we're part of something bigger. We'll have to learn new rules, make new mistakes, figure out how to be part of a community that spans 1,000 worlds. Valara considered this. You will succeed. Your species has faced worse challenges and survived. I know, but I'll miss the simplicity, I think. When it was just us, when we only had each other. He looked at her. Does that make sense? It does. My people felt the same when we first joined the galaxy. It took generations for us to fully adapt, but we became stronger for it. You will too. Danny nodded slowly. What happens now? For you, I mean, will you go back to Karth Prime? Valara had been thinking about this question for days. She had a duty to her people. Her father expected her to return and take up her responsibilities as princess. There were political obligations waiting for her, ceremonies and councils and all the tedious work of royalty. But she did not want to go. Not yet. I have been considering my options, she said carefully. My report to the council recommended that humanity be given a Korthi liaison, someone to help guide them through their first years as galactic citizens, someone who understands both worlds. Danny's eyes widened. You're volunteering? I am. If the humans would have me. Are you kidding? Danny laughed, a bright sound that echoed off the observation deck walls. You're the first alien who ever treated us like equals instead of children. Of course, we'd have you. Valara felt something warm bloom in her chest. It was an unfamiliar sensation. She thought it might be happiness. Then it is settled. I will remain with humanity for as long as I am needed. That could be a long time. We're pretty needy. I have noticed this. She smiled, showing teeth that were designed for tearing flesh, but somehow managed to look friendly. You are also worth the effort. Danny turned to face her fully. In the starlight, his scars were barely visible. He looked young and brave and impossibly fragile. And somehow, also incredibly strong. Valara, can I ask you something? Of course. In your speech to the council, you said humanity was terrifying. The most dangerous species you'd ever met. Do you really believe that? She thought about the question carefully. She thought about everything she had seen since boarding the Wanderer. The casual acceptance of pain. The willingness to sacrifice. The refusal to ever give up. Yes, she said finally. I believe it absolutely. Your species evolved on a world that should have killed you. You have no natural weapons, no armor, nothing that should have allowed you to survive. And yet you did not just survive. You conquered. You spread across your planet and then beyond it. You reached for the stars because you refused to accept limits. She reached out and placed one massive clawed hand on his shoulder, being careful not to cut his soft skin. You are terrifying, Danny Cole, all of you, because you do not know how to stop. You do not know how to accept defeat. You will keep fighting, keep struggling, keep surviving, until the universe itself gives up trying to kill you. Danny smiled at her. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I do not know yet, but I intend to stay and find out. They stood together at the window, watching the stars. Behind them, on Nexus Station, celebrations continued. Humans and aliens mingled together. The first steps of a new era in galactic history. Somewhere out there, Earth spun on its axis, a tiny blue marble in an ocean of darkness. A Deathworld. A Category 12 nightmare that had produced the strangest, most remarkable species the galaxy had ever seen. And now that species was loose among the stars. Valara did not know what the future would hold. She did not know what challenges humanity would face, or how they would change the galaxy around them. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever happened next, humanity would face it the same way they had faced everything else in their long and bloody history. Together, stubbornly, and absolutely refusing to die. The galaxy had no idea what it had just invited into its ranks. But it was going to find out, and Valara was going to be there to watch. Because this strange, soft, terrifying species had done something no other creature had ever managed. They had made her curious about the future, and that, perhaps, was the most human thing of all.